Hello, and how are you?
Hello, Gary Puckett. I'm well. How are you?
I'm terrific, thank you.
Awesome. It's been a few years since I've spoken to you, but I remember enjoying our conversation very much last time, and I'm very glad to hear that you're coming back to Australia. If it's okay with you, though, I really want to retrace all of those incredible steps that you took in the 60s and relive that time with you a bit.
Okay. Do whatever you want to do. It's your show.
Oh, great. Love a man who's in my hands. That's fabulous. And Gary, 1968 was really the big year for Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, but it started a way before that for you, didn't it?
Well, yeah, I had been working locally in the San Diego, California area, trying to make it all happen. But I was just a local guy, in a local band, and we were good, but I wanted to get out of the nightclubs. I wanted to get into the national music scene and hopefully make some records and good ones and get out there and work on the road and be able to perform with the likes of Chicago and Creedence Clearwater and the Beach Boys and all the others that were making the scene, so to speak, at the time. And it took kind of a while to figure it out and put it together, but once I did, it was like an overnight success, So
Amazing. So you actually left a university career in order to pursue your ambitions of becoming a musician.
well, I guess you could say that. What is happening here? Sorry, got to make
That's
sure
right.
my phone is on silent. Yeah, my folks had wanted me to go into higher education, and I don't blame them. I mean, it took me until I had daughters and grandkids and things to understand, that parents always want their kids to do better than they did. No matter how well they did, they want their kids to do better. And they wanted me to go into higher education and hopefully medicine. They liked that idea a lot, And they were kind of pushing dentistry at me for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, it
Turns
was a
out
nice,
that
solid career, wouldn't it? People would always need a dentist or a doctor.
well, it's really true. And it turns out that my father-in-law was a practicing dentist since when 1977. He just retired recently. Our daughter, who just turned 37, is a brilliant pediatrician. So, I ended up sort of on the fringes of the medical community. But yeah, I had gone to school a couple of years, and I just found myself working more toward the music thing, if you know what I mean. I'd be in a band, and we'd work for the Navy or the Marines, or San Diego is a military town, so I found myself working in the enlisted men's clubs and things like that. But nightclubs at some point, though they were fun for a while, as a young person, I found myself saying, gosh, I don't know if I want to do this all my life,
Yeah, right.
because it's a drinking, smoking, sort of rowdy crowd in its own way, So I thought I got to figure something out here. And I went to Los Angeles at one point and found this small agent. And I said, would you come down and take a look at my band and see if you think we have value, to put out on the road? And he did, and he was sort of on the fence with us, well, you guys are okay, I'll see if I can get you a job out there, and that's when I found out that being on the road is without hit records is really not easy. It's really hard. And so while we were on the road, we were up in Seattle. As a matter of fact, it was February, just about this time of year. And I said, fellas, I think I've figured it out. I had always had an interest in the Civil War history for the US. And if you go online, you can find incredible photographs, of the living and the dead. And I went, I'd like to be different than everybody else out there, because I had a feeling that maybe if we had a visual look about us, an appearance that was different, that it might have something to do with the success of the group ultimately. So, am I good in the frame
Yeah,
here?
that's
I'm
better
not
now.
really
What,
sure.
Gary Puckett, what was your fascination with the Civil War about?
I don't know. I guess it was just that I mean, it was all about slavery. It was all about the changing of the guard, so to speak. I mean, the country had split in two basically, and I found that part of the American history interesting in so much as um, the South wanted to retain the slavery so that they could continue to have cheap labor and pick their cotton and sell their cotton to countries around the world, and but there were those who saw that slavery was an injustice to mankind. So I found myself looking at those books and things, and at some point, I just went, you know what? I think we could dress like the Union soldiers dressed, and I grew up in the Yakima Valley. Yakima is an Indian word and name, and Union Gap is in the southeast corner where the river and the railroad went through. And I went, that's it. We're going to wear Union soldier outfits. We're going to call it the Union Gap because it meant something to me, not to anybody else.
What
But
is
I
the
thought,
Union
it's
Gap?
what is it?
Mm.
It's just a town. It's a
Ah,
town in the southeast corner of the Yakima Valley. And I never lived there. I used to hitchhike there when I was 15 years old to do my Saturday job. And there was a very old man who lived in a little house on the back of the property where I worked. And he would come out when I was finished working on Saturday. And of course, the business was closed except for me washing all their trucks and things. And he'd come and sit on the dock with me and tell me about his life, 1880s, 1890s, and I found that fascinating as well. So, Union Gap was someplace that was close to my heart in that sense. So Union Soldier, Union Gap, and the band thought it was the dumbest thing they ever heard.
did they?
What? We're going to wear Union Soldier outfits? You must be crazy.
So you thought at the time that you needed a gimmick to rise above everybody else that was playing in the same space?
Well, in a sense, you're right. I thought that a gimmick, if you want to call it that, would put us in a different frame of mind with people. So uh, when we finished working up in Seattle, we went down to Portland and worked in a club called the Long Branch Saloon, and it was actually a topless club. Fortunately, we were at one end of the club and the topless was at the other end of the club. So then from there, we went to a club in Vallejo, California, which was also a topless club, and we didn't know it. And as we stood up there, playing our first set, there was nobody up there but us. But on the second set, the ladies came up on these dancing stages next to us, and I had worked with dancing stages, dancing girls, but not topless, and it was very difficult to stay,
To stay
focused.
focused.
Yeah, on the audience, with naked ladies on either side of you. At any rate, we finished there and went to. I took them to California to Los Angeles, and there's a business there called Western Costume,
Just
and
before
that's
you
where.
get there, at this stage, are you Gary and the Remarkables, or you are
No, we
already Gary Puckett
at
and the
this
Union
point
Gap?
we are at this point we are Gary and the Remarkables, and but the name was in my head, and the idea was in my head, and so I said, okay, fellas, here's where we're going. We're going to go down there and we're going to get outfits from Western Costume. Now that's where the movie producers and directors go if they're going to do a movie, and they get all their costumes, whether it's a hippie set or it's a World War II set or a Civil War
Yeah,
set. That's where they go.
right.
So we found out that the outfits were incredibly expensive. Well, far more expensive than we could afford. So I rented one and I took the guys and went to Tijuana, Mexico, which was just a hop and skip down the road from San Diego. And I found a little tailor and held up the jacket, and he just nodded his head and said, okay. And he made these beautiful, great jackets for us. And so that was kind of the beginning. Then I took the boys and went to a little ghost town attraction outside of San Diego. Have you ever heard of Knott's Berry Farm?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, well, Knott's Berry Farm has this section where they do the Western thing, and they've got a jail and all that stuff, and the sheriff, and they chase the bad guys and they
Uh-huh.
shoot, and people fall off the roofs, and it's very entertaining. Well, it was a kind of a mini Knott's Berry Farm in that way, and we took a lot of pictures with the sheriff and the deputies, and then we went to the saloon and took pictures with the saloon girls, and jumped over the tombstones in the cemetery, and then I assembled it all uh, with those photos with songs that I had written, lyrics, and made this portfolio. Took it to all the record companies in Los Angeles. Most of them turned us down, but there were two companies that showed interest. One was Coal Gems, and they had a group called the Monkees. And we thought, well, if they bite, that could be a good thing. The other company that was interested was Columbia Records, and they were much more what is it I want to say? Much more established, I think, because Coal Gems, they were sort of, I mean, they were big because they were a part of the film industry. But at any rate, I found a guy at Columbia Records who liked the outfits. He liked my voice. He had a song in his hand, and he said, let's go make a record. So that was kind of the
Before you
beginning.
go there, were the rest of the guys, were you still getting a lot of backlash from the rest of the guys when you went
Well,
and played in Knott's Berry Farm and you did all of this? Were you met with resistance, or they'd given in and going, oh, well, we'll just go ahead with whatever crazy Gary wants?
yeah, that's a good way to put it. Um, Actually, they were real resistant to the outfits at first because we looked like we were going to a costume party, you know. And we were working in a club in San Diego called the Quad Room, and it was in a bowling alley. And you had to walk into the bowling alley actually to go in the front door of this club. So I said, okay, everybody, we're in our outfits, we're going to work. And they said, nope, we're coming to your house and we're all going together. I said, okay, let's go. So you should have seen it. It was really kind of fun and funny. We walked in, of course, and all five of us are in our Union soldier garb, and the bowlers, of course, turned around and looked, and the next thing you know, they're all kind of pointing and going, what's going on? What's this? And it was, for a while, we kind of go, well, here's Paul Revere and the Raiders again, and then blah, blah, blah. But then it started to catch on. People liked the idea of it. It made for sort of a party atmosphere in the nightclub. And it was a very popular nightclub, and we were becoming a better and better band every night that we worked. So pretty soon it was something that everybody appreciated and was kind of falling in love with. So at that point, I'm taking the portfolio to all the record companies, and ended up at Columbia Records, and a fellow by the name of Jerry Fuller, who himself was an artist, songwriter, had some success locally in Texas, and then decided to go to Los Angeles to seek his fame and fortune in the recording business.
As you do.
So he was setting up his office, and I had walked in the front door of Columbia Records, and I asked the lady who was kind of the receptionist, I'll call her, at the telephones, and I said, "Would you want to hear a new band?" You know, and she said, oh, "Well, wait a minute," and she did a couple of unplug and plug, and she said
Right.
something. And then she said, "Well, go down that hallway, turn right, and go to the second door on your right, and you'll find a guy by the name of Jerry Fuller." And I said, "Okay." So I did. And I went down, I looked in, and he was standing by the wall, pounding a nail in the wall. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm putting up a gold record award." And I said, "Okay, for what?" And he said, "Well, it's a song I wrote for Sam Cooke, but Sam didn't want it. Ricky Nelson did, and it sold 4 million copies." And I said, "Wow." I mean, I was really impressed. And I said, "Can I see it?" And he said, "Sure." So it was Ricky Nelson's Traveling Man. Remember that song?
Oh,
I'm a
sure.
traveling man made a lot of stops. Song I loved, and I mean, I remember watching the Nelsons on TV and waiting for the last 5 minutes so that Ricky could perform, with his band and all that. And so I said, please, will you look at my portfolio? And he did. He liked what he saw, what he heard, and he asked where he could see the band. So he came down to San Diego to the Quad Room. Actually, he showed up a night before. He said he would show up. I said, I'll be there Saturday. Showed up on Friday. And he walked up to the stage at midnight, and I almost didn't recognize him. And I looked down and I said, you're supposed to be here tomorrow night. And he said, I wanted to catch you off guard. I
And
said,
he
you
and
did.
he did, didn't he? Because I heard that you'd been kind of taking it easy that night anyway in your performance, waiting to impress him the following night.
That's exactly right. I was letting the other guys sing more and, saving my voice for the next night. But he looked up at me and said, let's go make a record.
Wow.
I said,
Gary, I mean, it was highly unusual that you'd been able to walk into Columbia and see him in the first place, wasn't it? I mean, usually there'd be gatekeepers everywhere and you wouldn't have been able to get to a Jerry Fuller in the way that you did.
well, that's why I think it was kind of divinely guided. I mean, I walked in the front door, went to the lady at the phones, and now Jerry was brand new. It's not like he had a lot of duties yet. He had been hired to write songs, to find talent, to make records, to make hit records.
Right.
And so he was basically free at the moment. And she said, well, he's brand new. Go down and talk to him. So
Is it all
yes,
in the
gatekeepers,
timing?
but in my case, there was no gatekeepers, and Jerry was very friendly and invited me in, so it all worked out.
Amazing. So he came down to see the band, despite the fact that you were taking it easy and letting the other guys sing, saving your voice for the star performance you were expecting the following night. He says
Right?
to you, come on down, let's make a record. I like what I
Yep.
see.
I just went, well, okay, let's see what happens. So we went out in the bowling alley. We sat in a booth and we just talked, while the bowlers bowled and, the evening was going on. And he said, I have a song that I think is a hit song. And I think you got a talented band and I like your voice and your outfits are cool. And there's a whole lot to it that is really, really grand. So he said, I'll be back in 4 to 6 weeks. I have to get contracts together before I can schedule a session or whatever. So I said, okay, I'll be waiting on you. So he called me at some point and said, okay, I'm coming down on Friday night. I've got contracts for recording and publishing and all that. And we sat in the very same booth in the bowling alley and signed contracts to be Columbia Records recording artists. And
Wow. What
so
what
we went in.
what was during the time when you were waiting for him to show up again? Did you believe he would show up? Were you nervous? Were you anxious? Were you kind of trying to talk yourself down and going, "Oh, well, if this doesn't happen," because I can imagine you'd be filled with excitement at the possibility.
Absolutely. And you said it all perfectly because, you have those doubts. You have those, kind of, well, this could happen. This might not happen. And it'll be really sad if it doesn't, but it'll be really great if it does. And,
Yeah.
and you go through those changes on a daily basis. But I kind of more felt that he was honest and sincere about the whole thing. And I had met him at his office, and so when he came back with contracts, we're kind of going, this is looking pretty good. So we'll see. Now, the next step, of course, is to record and then actually have a record that you can hold in your hands, and send to the disc jockeys and hope that they'll play it kind of thing. So
How old are you at this time?
I was, let's see, this was early 67. So I would that year I was turning let's see 2 to 7. I was turning 24.
Wow, it's amazing. So, what was the song that he had for you?
Woman, woman, have you got cheating on your mind? Written by a couple of guys from Nashville, Jimmy Payne and Jim Glazer, and they were in a group called Tom Paul and the Glazer Brothers, and they had recorded it as a country record, and it sounded very country, had a fuzz guitar in it, and all the country elements. But Jerry heard through all of that. He says, I hear a hit song, I just hear it being done differently, So he said, don't pay too much attention to it as it is. We'll change it a little bit, and we're gonna, make it a pop record. So he
It
was
was
right.
originally called Girl Girl, right?
No, it was called Woman Woman. Have you got cheating on your mind?
No, the Glazer Brothers song, the original country hit was called Girl Girl, wasn't it?
Mm-mm. No.
Wasn't it? Ah,
If it was, you know something I don't.
that's my research tells me it was called Girl Girl when it came out
You,
as a
you
country hit.
oh, you saw that somewhere that you were researching.
Yeah. Anyway, I might
Right.
be. It may be wrong. I'll double check on that. But
Well,
so you've recorded Woman Woman in '67.
yes.
Tell us what happens then. I think we all know what happens then, but in your words.
Well, it was a marvelous experience, I got to say. August 17, we went into the studio. All Union Gap were there. They weren't really sure. Jerry wasn't sure. He was in charge, so whatever Jerry said was law, basically. He brought in a 30-piece orchestra. We had strings and horns and rhythm section, and we had some of the members. They became the wrecking crew, and you've researched that, I'm sure, and found out there were 12 or 15 players that were considered to be a part of the wrecking crew. That came later, that name and all that, but Hal Blaine was there, Howard Roberts was there, Carol Kay was there, Mike Dacey, others who were considered to be a part of the wrecking crew. And it was just a fantastic. Oh, Glenn Campbell was there.
Oh,
He
really?
was on many of our first on our recordings throughout the first two albums.
Wow.
So
Didn't know that.
yeah, and we got to know Glenn pretty well, and I was a big fan of his. I loved his voice, I loved his television program, I loved his records. In fact, got to know his arranger pretty well. Al DeLore was his name, and it was fabulous what Al did with those songs. And so Glenn was there playing fantastic guitar and just being Mr. Funny Man at times. So it was really, really a lot of fun to do. But
It,
that
it,
day was special. It was really,
I
really.
can imagine, and it must have been quite daunting for you too to have all of those people that they'd invested so heavily into this song.
Well, it was. He was well organized. He knew what he wanted. He knew how to get it. Our arranger's name was Al Capps, not the cartoonist, but Al Capps was his name. We were doing 3 songs that day. It was union, so they would do three 1-hour sessions that were 50 minutes with a 10-minute break. So Jerry had to get that song track down in 50 minutes, and he was able to do that somehow. It to me was it was awesome. It was a little frightening, a little electric, now they had a vocal booth that I was to sit in, just a little tiny booth, and the orchestra was all around me. So I was supposed to sing with the orchestra, but when I put on the headphones and I heard the drums do their thing and the strings go and the gliss, it was so beautiful that I became emotionally overwhelmed and I couldn't even sing. I said, "You guys are going to have to go on without me because I can't sing. This is impossible. I want to listen. I'm going to record my part later." So that's what we did. They played the track perfectly within the 50 minutes, and
Wow.
I think it was the next day that we recorded the vocal. But
Wow.
but it was a swell special day.
I bet. Would you normally sing sitting down? Wouldn't you normally stand up to sing?
Yeah, normally.
Right.
But
And
I
and
think
did
that
you
I
and did you stand up the next day when you recorded, or you did it sitting
Yeah, I
down?
think I did. But there were times when I would sit down to sing. Uh, but I remember myself sitting down in that booth in order to uh, to try to sing. But
It didn't happen.
no, it didn't happen.
Well, that must have been one of the first tracks, though, where the vocal and the orchestra were split from each other, where you overdubbed it afterwards, wouldn't it? That wasn't that popular at the time.
Well, no, people did that. And we recorded first on 8 tracks. So the producers in those days needed to know how to put tracks together, bouncing tracks, so to
Uh-huh.
speak.
Uh-huh.
So, to create a stereo image and all of that, and leave room for background vocals and leave room for a lead vocal and all that. And Jerry was smart. He had good engineers and they knew what to do. And I never had a doubt that they didn't know what they were doing.
Wow. Wow. He was pretty special, Jerry Fuller, wasn't he? I mean, he really was the key to your success. I wonder what would have happened, and I'm sure you ask yourself often what would have happened if that meeting with him hadn't have happened at the time.
I would have continued looking. I
I
don't
bet
know
you
that
would.
it would
I
have.
bet you would. You were
Yeah,
pretty determined, right?
yeah, but I don't know if it would have turned out the way that it turned out, because we had extreme success, in '68 particularly. Jerry was smart. He he would say, first the song, then the singer. If a song is a hit song, it's a hit song. In fact, do you know who Morrissey is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he
Contemporary
recently did.
artist, right?
Yeah, he recently did an album uh, of older songs. And Lady Willpower was one of the songs that he did. And his comment was, a great song is a great song. And he doesn't sing like I do, but he did a great version of Lady Willpower, because
Oh.
he said, this is fantastic. It's just a great song. So anyway, Jerry would say, song first, singer next, and all the other picture around it after that. So whenever I get to hear Woman Woman on the air, in fact, they told me on from Sirius Radio that I'm one of their core artists on '60s Gold. So I every once in a while will talk to Flash Phelps, and he'll play Woman Woman or Young Girl or whatever. And when I get to hear them on the air, I think those are great sounding records, and they don't sound dated. Like, if
No,
you
they
look.
don't. No, they
No, they
still
don't.
hold up brilliantly today.
Yeah, and that was one of Jerry's strengths. He knew how to make things, give them longevity. So,
Right.
and many of the records of that era that have 12 string, for instance, can sound kind of dated. But my records sound great,
Yeah, really
and
fresh. I mean, what an incredible year 1968 was for you. You had 6 consecutive gold records in one year. I mean, you must have been, you wouldn't have had time to touch the ground. Tell me, tell me about what happened after Woman Woman.
Well, then we started to go out on the road. I mean, first of all, Woman Woman was getting split airplay on radio stations, because I'm sure you remember that they had an A side and a B side,
Sure.
and they were different. So radio stations could choose which side they wanted to play, and some stations were playing Woman Woman, others were playing Don't Make Promises. And so Jerry said to me at one point, I think we might have to go in and record and try again, because we're getting pushback from one side to the other. One station wants this one station wants that one. Well, one of the keys to the success, I believe, was my, I'm going to call it purely brilliant, but accidental brilliance in the outfits that I chose to wear. And the fact that before we got Woman Woman recorded, I kept hounding the record company that when the record was printed and came out, that they put a picture of us on the sleeve of the record. And they kept telling me that they never did that for brand new groups. They just always used the brown or the black or the white or whatever color it was going to be. And that was it. And I kept saying, no, you've got to put a picture of this group. And I kept on negotiating, I'll call it. And finally they relented, and we went to a school in Van Nuys that had been destroyed by the wrecking ball. And if you've ever seen the picture on Woman Woman, we were positioned on the stage in the auditorium, that was all crashed down.
I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they did it in sepia tone, which was the old style of photography, and it was a fabulous photograph. And turns out that there was a disc jockey program director in Columbus, Ohio, WCOL. His name was Bob Harrington. I don't think Bob is with us anymore, but Bob was a Civil War historian. Guess what? When he's going through the new records, flipping through them, he says, "Whoa, what is this picture? Wow, what a fantastic picture. Um, I wonder what this record sounds like." So he put it on as an audition, and he loved the record. So he put it on his station as what he liked to call a pick to click. And it went to number one. So that's when the regional office of Columbia Records, which is in Cleveland, just 100 miles away or something like that, called me in San Diego, and they said, "You have a hit record." I said, "I do?" He said, "Well, it's only in Columbus, Ohio, but it's number one in Columbus, Ohio. So now we know how to make this a national and even maybe a worldwide hit."
Uh-huh.
So I said, "Okay, let's go. What do we do?" And they said, "We're going to bring you to Cleveland. We're going to put you to work in a club here in the basement of the Sheraton Hotel called Otto's Grotto." And so we went to Cleveland, and we went to work in the club. And in the daytime, we'd get up and I would drive out with a fellow by the name of Steve Popovich, who was their regional promotion director. And he went to all the stations, throughout Ohio and wherever. And, uh, we promoted that record, and it started catching on. So each night we'd work in the club, and then there was a disc jockey. I believe he was also on WCOL. No, it was WIXY. His name was, I think it was Dick Kemp,
Okay.
and he was called the Wild Child.
I
And
love
he
it.
just he had this wild way of being a disc jockey on the air. And you remember how disc jockeys could be in those days. They could do what they wanted to do, and he would come to the club and broadcast from the club and just have a great time. And he helped as well. So we saw Woman jump on the Billboard charts. I think it was at I don't recall. It might have been 94 or something, but you remember the red stars
Of
that,
course, with a bullet. Yeah.
that's right, with the bullet. So maybe it was even better, but still, we saw it jump on and then move up. And that's when they started to book us out onto the road. And that's when we started to get sick. And and the reason was because we did everything. We picked up the gear, we put it in the truck, we took it out of the truck, we took it into the club, we set it up, we did the sound check, we did the show, we'd tear it down, put it back in
Wow.
the, and we did that for, I don't know, a couple of months. And we drove ourselves, and we ended up with flus and colds and things, but
Totally run
it took
down.
us, pardon me?
You were totally run down.
Run down, just run down. But we were still, pumped, by the fact that the record was rising on the charts. And so we got through it and ended up doing our very first radio promotion show. It was called, I think it was at the Pittsburgh Sports Arena. And I don't remember what they called it in those days, but there were, I think, 8 acts on this show. And one of them I remember was the Lemon Pipers, and we got to know those guys, and they were just kind of hip guys. But we closed the first half of the show, and it was pretty awesome to be in front of 20,000 people. I have to laugh about it now because it was a horrible feeling. We only had one hit record, and we had to play 20 minutes. And the crowd for 20 minutes just went boo. Imagine 20,000 people. Boo.
No.
Yeah. So anyway, I knew that they didn't really mean it. I mean, they did in a way. They were sort of polite when we played Woman. But they wanted to see the closers. They wanted to see Junior Walker and the All-Stars. They wanted to see Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels and whoever else was closing the show, you know. So but we soldiered on, you know.
In your uniforms. And of course, it wasn't long then that until you had your next big hit. In fact, an even bigger hit.
Yes, Young Girl followed it. Woman Woman sold about 1.5 million or more, I guess. And then it leveled off and started a slow descent. Young Girl came on and immediately sold about 2.5 million. So that was terrific in so much as it gave us a wave to ride, you know, a crest of a wave. And Lady Willpower followed with another, I don't know, 2.5 to 3 million records. And then Over You, which I always called the quiet million seller, but 68 was just a special year for Gary Puckett and the Union Gap.
It was an insane year. I can't imagine how pumped you must have been for that entire 12 months. And of course, I mean, peppered in with that in 68 too, you were invited by the then President of the United States, Lyndon B. Johnson, to play at the White House in the presence of Prince Charles and Princess Anne. You were in huge demand. And there was, I just want to talk about Jerry Fuller's lyrics for a little bit, because the songs that you were singing, they had kind of almost bizarrely pedophilic lyrics, didn't they? They weren't your average kind of love songs.
I'll take exception to what you say, because if you read the lyric to Young Girl, now Woman Woman, that's all about a person being in love and really being in love, and the other person does not reflect back to that person the love that they want to feel. So that the guy in the song is going, wait a minute, I love you,
yeah,
but I can see you're looking at somebody else, and you've got cheating on your mind. That's definitely not pedophilia.
No, that's not. But Young Girl is. Young
No,
Girls.
it's not.
Why not?
It's not. Because he says to the girl, you led me to believe beneath your perfume and makeup, you're just a baby in disguise. You led me to believe that you were old enough to give me love, but now I find out that you're not. So go away, get out of my mind. My love for you is out of line. Go away. That's basically what the song is saying. Go read it. Find it online, please, because I never look at it as a pedophilia kind of thing.
But you've heard that criticism before, haven't you?
Oh, yeah, people say that all the time. But I say, I don't think you're right. I think you're wrong. Okay,
cool.
You know, that's
in my experience with the song, it never crossed my mind that it was. But in researching you, I've seen that a lot of people have said that Jerry Fuller's lyrics were like way out there. They were certainly different, maybe more intense than the average love song that was being sung at the time in pop hits, weren't they?
Yeah, maybe so. But you know, there's many others that are. Did you ever hear? Glee do their thing with Young Girl and Don't Stand So Close to Me?
Yeah.
They're very much the same, and that was Sting talking about, you know, and Roxanne and those other songs. You know, they're very blatant in a sense. With all the charms of a woman, you kept the secret of your youth. You know, to me, that was like a truth, and I lived through those things oftentimes. You led me to believe you're old enough to give me love, and now it hurts to know the truth. We were all young people at one time, you know?
Yes, we were. It doesn't seem all that long ago, does it? It's gone very, very quickly. So 1968, you're on top of the world. You've got 6 consecutive gold records in 1 year. And I think that was more than any other band of any time ever had, wasn't it?
Well, they say that, and we sold more records than any other artist, they say, in 1968. And then they say, including the Beatles. And I always say, well, they were just having a bad year. And I think they were. that whole thing with Yoko and Linda
Oh,
and John and all that. The
right,
stuff I'm talking
right.
about. But
So what happens for Gary Puckett and the Union Gap come 1969?
actually, we had a very good year that year too. That was the year that we actually did the command performance, or was it 70? No, I think it was going into 60. No, it's hard sometimes for me to put that exact. I think it was in August of
And
69.
Gary Puckett, I got to tell you, it's hard for anybody to put the years in perspective when you get to this
Good.
age.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. At any rate, it was actually the Nixon administration, not Johnson. But that aside, um, we had a wonderful time. We met the prince, we met the princess. I can actually say that I did a command performance for the King of England. He just happened to be the prince at that time.
Yeah, right. Nobody knew what would happen with him, did they? For
No.
sure. So 69, you're still doing it big time. You've had more hits as well. You had Lady Willpower. That was huge for you too. They were all written by Jerry Fuller, weren't they?
He wrote Young Girl, Lady Willpower, and Over You. Jerry and I did a lot of songwriting together. So we wrote things like Daylight Stranger and Now and Then and other album cuts and B-sides and things like that. We wrote a song called The Pleasure of You, which I thought was a great song and he thought could be a single. And there was a guy by the name of Jack Bedient and the Chessmen. You may be able to find him online as well, who recorded it, and they thought that he would have a big hit with it. But I guess he was a little bit too much like Gary Puckett or something. He was a great singer, but maybe they thought he's just a little bit too much like Gary. I don't know. He didn't have a hit with it, and I wish he would have. But lots of songwriting going on at the time, and we did what we could.
Yeah. And then there started to be trouble within the ranks of the Union Gap, didn't there? People
Well,
weren't
there
happy
was,
anymore.
yeah. Carrie Chater, who recently died from COVID, actually,
Ah,
and Gary Witham, his writing partner, decided to stay at home, and they had gotten a deal with the Irving Almo publishing wing of A&M Records, and they wanted to stay home, write songs, not travel, and so they did, and we changed the band, and there were other members, and it's when you change
wasn't the
the
same.
recipe,
Yeah,
no, you change the recipe of the cake, and it
that's
tastes
right.
different.
Doesn't come out the same. That's right.
Yeah.
You must have all been exhausted from that huge year that you'd had. It's no wonder that he wanted to stay at home. But that brought the downfall for Gary Puckett and the Union Gap.
Well, to some degree, yes. There were also other things happening that were just a part of the world machinations. 1969 into 70, they were trying to wind down the Vietnam War. Music tastes were changing. People were starting to dress differently. When the 70s came in, everything was changing. We had glitter rock, if you recall, with Bang a Gong and David Bowie and all that kind of stuff. And, the English invasion was kind of over, as it were, but there were artists who succeeded and survived, but they came in late in the 60s. Elton John, Stevie Wonder. At any rate, I decided I was going to take a year off and write songs, excuse me, and come back, and everybody would be arms open wide. Let's go, Gary. It didn't work out that way. And basically, a lot of the 60s artists were just kind of ostracized, if that's a good word. I'm not sure that it is, but we were just kind of booted out
To
in
make way for the
favor.
new guard.
Say again?
To make way for the new guard.
Yeah, to make way
Yeah.
for the new whatever it is type
Yeah.
of music.
It
Technology.
also, I seem to feel like you kind of paved the way for all those glam rockers and for the David Bowies and for the Elton Johns with all their gimmick and get-ups and everything. You were one of the originals that thought, let's give them a whole show.
Well, that's kind of true, and I appreciate you seeing that and expressing it. But when things change, they just change, and there's always unintended consequences, and you can never know what those consequences can be or will be, So throughout the 70s, I found myself kind of reeling. I was, for a year, I was studying dance, I was studying acting, I was writing songs, I was just really busy thinking, I'm preparing to come back. But when I made the effort to come back, nobody was interested.
The times had changed.
Yeah. Bob Dylan said it, the times they are changing, and they did. So I found myself, throughout the 70s, really just kind of trying. And I studied dance for a long time, studied acting, ended up in the Philippine Islands making a movie called Dynamite, wrote all the music for it. You probably won't find anything about it. It was, excuse me, it was funded by a Philippine family. And I spent months over there in front of the camera, behind the camera. It was an incredible experience. And somewhere I've got all the tapes of the music that we wrote and recorded with the University of the Philippines choir and a band called the Juan de la Cruz Band. So marvelous experience, but never
didn't
came.
eventuate in the way that you'd hoped it would. Did you manage to keep your glass half full during those years? Because I can imagine that to come down from being so high to a different form of reality. And I hear you say you kept trying, and that's so commendable. But there must have been times where you slipped down and go, oh, I made a mistake, or, what's happened here, or I'm depressed, or how was it emotionally for you?
Well, there were low times, obviously, and I also went through, I had been married and I went through a divorce. California law said the woman gets everything, you guys don't get anything, that kind of thing. So it was a bit depressing to have come from such a high place, and making really good money and all that kind of stuff, and it all going to the divorce. But that aside, I was willing to do whatever was necessary to continue on. So there came a point in the late 70s, finally, that I moved out of Los Angeles and said, I'm going to go start from square one again, go back to the nightclubs, which I did, and worked as a duo with a friend of mine who was a fabulous electric guitar player. And I played acoustic guitar, and we played everything from Buddy Holly to Gary Puckett and the Union Gap to what's the Little River Band, you guys, and I mean, we worked in nightclubs again, and it was enlightening, and sometimes a little bit depressing, but people came to see me, they lined up, and so we did whatever we could to please the people. I found myself working 9 to 2 every night, like we did before the big success of the Union Gap. But they came, they listened, and the people supported me in that regard, So
well, the audience never forgot you. The record companies might have shoved you aside, but the audience never forgot you, and so much so that you got another break when you were tapped on the shoulder to open for the Monkees on their 20th anniversary tour, right?
That's true. It was actually 2 years before that. I had done a concert in New York City at the Meadowlands, it was then called, and a guy came to me and said, my boss wants to talk with you. And I said, okay. So I went into New York City, and he said, I'm working with the Turtles and I'm working with the association. And he said, I'd like to work with you as well. And I said, okay, let's go to work and do what we can do. So I suggested to them that they put the three of us out on tour. They said, after thinking about it, they said, great idea. We're going to add a group to it. So it was Spanky and our gang, Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, the Association, and the Turtles, and it was called Happy Together. And we worked 9 months of 1984 as the first Happy Together tour. In 1985, they did a second one. In 1986, the same people produced the Monkees 20-year reunion tour. And all those women were now 20 years older and had 15-year-old daughters who were big fans of the Monkees. And so we did the biggest tour of that year together with Herman's Hermits, the Grassroots, myself, and the Monkees Closed, So they set records for attendance and records for merchandise. It was fantastic. So
Wow.
we were kind of off again, and it was all happening.
You're amazing. You're such an ideas man. I didn't realize that it was you that had founded the whole Happy Together tour stuff, because that's still going today, isn't it?
It is. I'll be on it again this year. I've become kind of a mainstay with the Happy Together tour, and it's great. We already have 53 cities we're doing from May 31st until the end of August, and I'm sure there's going to be probably 10 more they put in there. And it's a little demanding, but don't you know that every show is sold out? People love that tour.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that you're coming to Australia by yourself, not with the Happy Together tour, and we're certainly looking forward to seeing you here. But I want to see the Happy Together tour here also in Australia. That would be sensational. Just, I know I need to let you go in a minute, but tell me what it was like going out with the Monkees.
Oh, it was exciting. Getting to know the Monkees as people, that was a lot of fun. They were there were internal problems, that being close to them, I would try to let them know that they should just forget their differences and come together for 3 months in the summertime, go out and make $20 million, which they could do, and then part ways and next year come back together again. But I enjoyed. I traveled with Peter a lot. I hung around with Davey a lot, and they were good people in their own way, And I loved them. I loved their music, so it was edifying and it was gratifying.
What's your favorite Monkees song?
Probably Sleepy Jean. What's the name of that song? So
yeah, I know the song.
Sleepy Jean, what it means to a
daydream believer. That's the one.
And the homecoming queen. But I like, Last Train to Clarksville. They're all great songs about Bobby Hart and what was the other fellow's name?
Boyce and Hart.
Bobby Boyce and Bobby Hart, great songwriters. Right. And I loved all those records. They were great.
Fabulous. So you've come full circle. You've gone from the nightclubs back to the nightclubs. You've gone from the top back to the top, and you've gone from touring back to touring again. I bet in 1968 you didn't think you'd still be doing it more than 50 years later, did you?
No, I did not. In 1968, we did 270 concert days. So it was demanding, and never thought that I'd be, here at this age continuing to do this. And I love it. I don't like to travel so much, but I love the people. I love how they love the songs and how they just sing along, and they just give me so much love. It's hard not to love what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to cart your own gear in and out of gigs anymore either.
I just carry my own guitar. That's all.
Perfect. Gary Puckett, fabulous chatting with you.